Shalom and welcome to the INSS podcast, broadcasted to you from our studio in Tel Aviv. We are recording this program today, the 28th of March 2023, after probably the most critical 24 hours Israel and the Israeli society as a whole have ever known. Here is a short summary of the latest events. Last night, after a day of deep uncertainty and tension all across the country, Prime Minister Netanyahu publicly announced his decision to temporarily suspend the legislative so-called reform in the Knesset, with special focus on the judicial appointments for the Supreme Court, and begin discussions between representatives of both the opposition and the coalition. 24 hours prior to his announcement, Netanyahu fired his defense minister Yoav Gallant after Gallant publicly announced that due to the immediate current security threats influencing the defense system caused by the legislative so-called reform, he will oppose the voting on the law for judicial appointments, which was supposed to take place this week. Minutes after the firing of Minister Gallant, hundreds of thousands of Israelis came out in the very late hour to the streets to demonstrate against this unprecedented and severe step. Throughout the whole day yesterday, it was not clear what will be with the coalition, as Minister Ben Gvir threatened to resign if the legislative process does not continue as planned. Parallel to these events in the Knesset, a general economic strike was also announced yesterday morning, in which planes did not have permission to take off, shopping malls were closed, as well as post and bank services. After 12 weeks of demonstrations, the opposers of the legislative upheaval marked this week as the week of national paralysis, while hundreds of thousands of Israelis demonstrated throughout the country in an attempt to stop the voting process. 200,000 of them alone in Tel Aviv last Saturday. Last night, this process was suspended. Ladies and gentlemen, on 2023, the year in which Israel marks 75 years of independence, it is clear already now that this year will also be remembered as the year in which the country's democratic and liberal DNA was severely threatened in a way never seen before. In view of this ongoing crisis, the Institute for National Security, INSS, for the first time ever, saw as its duty to issue a strategic alert warning decision makers in Israel exactly what are the implications for Israel if the legislative process continues as planned. This strategic alert is the outcome of a deep sense of responsibility for the present and future of the State of Israel. We will discuss the latest events in Israel as well as the main points of the INSS alert in depth with researchers of the INSS. INSS podcast in view of latest events. I'm Adi Kantor. We begin right after this. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the INSS podcast, today broadcasted to you from our studios here at the INSS Tel Aviv. My name is Adi Kantor. The question, what now, occupies many in this country in view of latest events in Israel, in the Israeli Knesset, in the Israeli streets. We will discuss this question and, in addition, focus on the INSS strategic alert published this week in view of the current unprecedented national legislative crisis Israel is faced with. Next to me in the table are former member of Knesset and journalist Ofer Shelah. Ofer served as a member of the Knesset for Yesh Atid from 2013 until 2020, and today is a senior researcher of the INSS. Also joining us today is Noa Shusterman, researcher at the INSS and the Israel-Palestinian Research Program coordinator. Together with Ofer and Noa, we will try for the next 30 minutes to elaborate on what exactly happened in Israel this week, focusing on the main current threats stated in the INSS strategic alert, and try to assess where is Israel headed now in view of Netanyahu's suspension of the legislative process. Ofer and Noa, thank you very much for joining me today, and warm welcome to you. So we begin, before we dive in depth in the details of the current situation, I ask you please to give maybe an opening sentence from each of you. Israel this morning, after latest events, after last night events. Ofer, we begin with you.
Well, what happened last night should have happened weeks ago. And a lot of damage has been done in those weeks, which I'm not sure all of which could be repaired. And hopefully now we will begin a process that really no real change or even definition of the kind of which we need now in order to understand where Israel is going and even the nature of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. None of that can be done or should be done in the way the government and the coalition were trying to do it. So now, hopefully, we are moving towards the way things should be done. There are still doubts in my mind and many Israelis' minds whether that's going to happen.
Thank you. Noa?
So I want to continue on Ofer's comments. I think it's going to be almost impossible or very, very difficult to reverse some of the damages that have already started taking place, especially when looking at the social texture of Israeli society, which has already been very fragile, but it seems that now a lot of the tensions have erupted, and violently, some of them. The events that we saw yesterday after the suspension on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, we already started to see rivaling right-wing groups also protesting for the reform, and this is after the reform was already suspended. And we saw them, clashing with the left-wingers.
Also so extreme groups.
Very extreme groups that have also been, some of them have been targeted also by the police as instigators of violence, such as La Familia, which is associated with fans of Beitar Yerushalayim. It's very concerning because first of all, we don't really know where is this going to go, and I want to refer for a minute to things that happened in Poland. Yesterday, there was a big reveal that the Israeli government has actually consulted with Poland on some of these aspects. And in Poland, after they were not successful in passing legislation because of protests, then they brought them back after 2 years, and much harsher. And at this point, it was very difficult for the protesters to actually come together and galvanize in a protest. So it's a question of where is this exactly going to go, whether this is genuine attempt to deliberate and to reach some sort of a broad agreement, or just a way to, placate the situation and allow the protest to die down by itself.
Go back home
and
then, and think this is all over, while maybe it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a lot of issues on the agenda for the next 20-something minutes. Let's try and dive in probably the most burning issues regarding security, the defense system. A lot has happened this week. Minister Gallant was fired by Prime Minister Netanyahu, even though he still did not receive an official letter. We don't know where things stand at the moment between Netanyahu and Gallant. Israel does not have at the moment a defense minister. Going maybe on a higher spectrum, there are many threats right now Israel is faced with, both internally and also externally. Just, in words, Iran, Hezbollah, the current wave of terror in the Palestinian territories, Ramadan. This is obviously not the right time to fire a defense minister. What are your views regarding the current situation from a security perspective?
Well, the outside threats, they're always there. They always have been there, and they will be there, and that's regardless of the internal situation in Israel. What's really threatening right now, and I don't even know whether that's changed, but it came to the fore, and this is irreversible, is the fact that the IDF, which is like in every country, there's this old maxim that the first thing about the state is that the state is the only one allowed to exercise violence, and the organizations that do that, security organizations, and first and foremost, the army, and in Israel, the IDF being a people's army, not only in the sense that there's conscription, but in the true sense. It came to the fore that the army is now another battleground where the Israeli identity political battle is taking place. And the fact that thousands of reservists, some of them in very vital places in the IDF, combat pilots, elite units, intelligence, the intelligence wing, and so on, were ready and seemed almost, I won't say, happy about it, but seemed ready to put on the table and actually start to implement this, because some of them said that even before the legislation they were not going to appear to reserve duty. And the question whether they are volunteers or this I don't want to refer to that. That is, I think, irreversible, because we will see more and more people, because so few people serve in the reserves in Israel, that has become sort of I would call it sort of capital within the debate, the political debate, and the identity debate in Israel. And they were willing to put it on the table. And in that sense, I think there's a lot of work to do, and we are putting right now a paper in the INSS about it. A lot of work to do to reestablish unity around the IDF, because that threatens to infiltrate not only the reserve ranks, but also the standing army ranks. And we've seen
it's
signs,
already happening.
We've seen signs of that. And there's real danger that, and also I want to remind everybody that the current coalition has in its mind legislation that is not directly part of the judicial reform or revolution, but is linked to it, because some of the Haredi parties, the reason they want the override clause is so that the draft, on the Supreme Court, is so that the new draft clause or the new laws actually absolving or taking the declaring officially for the first time in Israel's history that a sector in Israeli society is exempt from military service, in Jewish society is exempt from military service. If that takes place, I think it's going to be the complete disintegration of the IDF. And this is the main threat, and this is what everybody needs to be dealing with now. And you're right, the firing of the defense minister. It's not only that the Gallant was saying what he should have said, had no alternative but
to present to the public what is happening right now.
It was his duty. But should someone replace him, that person would not enjoy any kind of trust, not from the Israeli public or from the general staff, because the general staff know that Gallant expressed their opinions and their fears about what's going on. So this is the main thing security-wise. The external threats, yes, they are there, they will be there, and Israel has always contended with them and knew how to deal with them as long as Israel was right from within, and it's not right from within right now.
Very disturbing. No, in continuation to what Ofer just mentioned, how is this current crisis seen from Palestinian eyes today, this morning?
So it's fair to say that Palestinians, they have a lot of mistrust towards the Israeli political system as is. So, I mean, they follow Israeli politics, actually. A lot of them are very much, watching Israeli television or reading about what's happening in Israel. But in terms of even when the coalition was first established and even now, they don't feel that they really have some sort of stake in the game, because, I mean, they do not have equal rights within the Israeli political system. You can say they have their political rights are within the Palestinian Authority, but they would argue that it's not only not fully functional, but actually it is inferior to Israeli occupation. So, I mean, and I'm not going to go into this, but that's why they're already kind of looking, they're looking to see what's going to happen, but they're not too concerned because it doesn't really have anything to do with them. They are concerned when it comes to an escalation in violence, and because
Ramadan, we are in the
not only Ramadan, but first of all, Ramadan I think is really important to mention, because if now the Israeli police is really, entangled in everything that's happening inside Israel, then also at the end of the day you have an infinite not an infinite amount of policemen. So you have to make sure that people are actually able to do law enforcement. So it's already at tenuous times that now some of the personnel actually needs to be doing other duties that are not necessarily things that have to do with law enforcement.
And they were occupied, of course, with the demonstrations and keeping right-wingers from left-wingers.
But the problem is that you also see rising tensions when it comes to extreme right-wing parties or elements that are calling for more violence towards Palestinians. We see more friction and more clashes in the West Bank. So these are things that are affected by the ambiance, the environment, the political environment, and everything that's going on in Israel. But I also want to state that in some respects, this is actually doing the Palestinians a lot of justice. Because, first of all, the international eye is looking at what's going on here.
We're just about to address this as well.
And anything that has to do with Israeli democratic values. And this is, in a way, this is a gift for the Palestinians. Because they have been trying to push for their, for their internationalizing of the conflict, going to the international courts. So this really helps them because
turning to the agenda.
Exactly. And it shows, in a way, for them, it shows what they always said that Israel is really about. That it's not really a democracy, that it's actually an occupying force. So for them, they see this as something that actually does them service and brings a lot of attention to Israel and negative attention. So that's in terms of the leadership. But I think the people who actually want to make a living and do have an interest in a flourishing economy, and they want to continue working in Israel, and they do want to have security stabilization, for them, yes, it's very concerning what's happening now in Israel.
Just to close this subject, what do you think? How will Ramadan be affected by this? How will the fact that there is a Ramadan right now? Police is occupied with other subjects at the moment. Do we see any signs on the ground for more escalation at the moment because of this? Because of what happened this week?
At this point, we don't see anything substantial. We see attempts, but to this point, it's worth saying that the security system is able to actually control and allow Palestinians to continue prayers in Al-Aqsa. But the problem is not whether or not this has happened already, but the situation is so volatile and escalatory fragile that it really takes just one match to for this entire thing to burn.
The question is, did someone already lit it or not yet? So this is not
at this point, it seems, and it's also worth saying that also previous Ramadan was also very escalatory, but one of the things that have changed since last year that we have this new phenomenon called the Lion's Den and the growing popularity for armed resistance within Palestinian society and support for this among young Palestinians who are, many of them are disassociated with a lot of the traditional organizations, and there's a lot of rebellion against the older generation. So this is something that has changed, and it's going to be a lot of distrust towards the system and also the Palestinian system. So it's going to be, we have to wait and see. But that's sort of like the keg of arson that's sitting there, and we have to see if somebody lights the match or not.
Yes, hopefully not. Thank you, Noa. Ofer, I'm returning now to you. Let's take now a more global or international perspective of what happened in Israel, especially this week, but maybe in the last 12 weeks. The U.S.-Israeli special relations, how were they affected? How are they right now affected by what happened in Israel this week?
Well, you got to see this in the broad context, which is that Israel in the United States right now, or for the past maybe decade, is moving away from being a bipartisan issue towards being, especially when Netanyahu, Likud, and especially in this government, they're seen as aligned only with one side of the American political map. And also in the context of the Jewish population in the United States, Israel is moving more and more away from the values and the political views of the and this of course has to do with the political rift within the United States itself, and with the United States being more the political scene in the United States being more acrimonious than it's ever been. But this is not only Israel's fault to a sense, but with this present administration and with vis-a-vis the Jewish community in Israel, definitely what happened right now. not only in the legislation discussed, because I'm not sure anybody in the United States gets into the details of how many politicians are there in
how many judges
in
will
the
be,
committee
yeah.
that elects judges. And
Yeah.
in the United States, as you know, the judges are elected.
It's a different system.
Yeah, it's a different
Checks
system.
and balances.
I'm not saying this is good here. The
Sure.
what was suggested here is good. I'm not sure what's happening in the United States is good. But
Yeah.
but in any case, also the rhetoric and the fact that they look and they see the demonstrations in Israel and the people demonstrating, a lot of them are moving around Washington and talking to people. And if the high-tech sector is moving away from Israel, it's definitely moving towards the United States. And so, and the high-tech, a lot of the high-tech in Israel lives according to Palo Alto time, has been for a long time. So yes, this is causing real damage, and I think the American administration, the Biden administration, has been very open and outspoken about it. And we've heard things that usually, in the usual sense, you would say, why are the Americans meddling in this?
For example?
But even the conversation between the president and the prime minister and what was taken out by the White House and the White House, what they said about that conversation. Basically, what came out is the American president lecturing the Israeli prime minister about democracy. And so if let's say the Netanyahu government and Netanyahu Smotrich Ben Gvir government is at odds with the present American administration to begin with. And all of that was, of course, exacerbated by what's going on right now.
This is it goes beyond worrying and disturbing. Because we are short in time, maybe last question to the both of you. Where are we headed? I know it's a very, very tricky question and maybe unfair, because this morning it's still very blurry and still very gray, because there's a lot of suspicion, I think, from both sides with regards to the attempts to discuss with one another. If it works, we don't know. It's yet to be seen. Your personal view on what's going to happen here. We're just about to approach Independence Day, 75 years of Israeli independence, Memorial Days. This is a very, very fragile, I think emotional time for many Israelis. Are we able to pass this time somehow, to survive this? Or how do you see the next months? How will they look like? Maybe not. We can start.
So I think, everything we've talked about is very concerning, but I think what really concerns us as Israelis is the sense that something broke. Something about the basic the basic trust you have in the system. And, going through conscription, serving in reserves, and it doesn't really matter who is the prime minister and who are the members of Knesset, but you have this basic trust in the system that even if it's not the person that you've elected, then we're going to have elections.
Politics.
It's beyond politics,
Yeah.
and there's going to be another round of elections, and another coalition is going to be built, and things are always dynamic.
Reversible,
and reversible in a sense. But I think there's, and this goes to the objectionists, and now basically those volunteers in the reserves who are saying, no more. Because once you don't have this basic trust in the system, and that the system
Contract,
is really,
it's a contract,
and it's
right?
a contract, and it's a genuine. There's something very genuine about it, about knowing that you're willing to sacrifice yourself for the state, and that you know that the state symbolizes something that you hold dear and that you cherish. And I think this really is a breaking point for a lot of people, not because they don't love the country, but because they don't see how the country can come back after something like this.
Or rewrite a contract between them.
Exactly. And then if you're going to, exempt all the Haredi and the ultra-Orthodox, and you're going to maybe not allow to have more a political judicial system, then maybe this contract is not anymore the contract that you want to partake in. And I think that's a very disturbing, frightening phenomenon. For the people in the high-tech sector, in a sense, they have options because
you mean economic options?
Economic options. They can go to Palo Alto and they can go to Portugal, which is now opening its doors to Israeli high tech. And there are enough countries that they want to bring the Israeli success story into their territory.
Yeah, I heard some voices calling to build a small Israel, little Israel somewhere else.
Exactly, and the question is then, if people do actually feel that there is no other option but leaving, then there's a question then who actually remains, and can you repair this broken contract?
What was broken? Ofer, what do you think about what was said here?
Well, first of all, on the immediate political level, nobody can really tell what's going to happen, because I think personally that had Netanyahu not made the mistake, from his view, the mistake of firing Gallant, then probably we would have had some legislation passed next week. Of course, we'll never know now. But
what if?
Yeah,
what if?
No, it's a sliding door moment. But really, so I don't know on the immediate political level. But I think on a deeper level, which Noa alluded to as well, it's not only that something broke. Somebody, and we know who they are, took the lid off the Pandora's box of Israeli existence, where a lot of demons have been hiding, who have been building. Let's be honest about it. They've been building for a long time.
They were there,
This
right?
Not the present government, or even this prime minister who's been in power for 14 years almost consecutively.
Sure. They were there.
They were there.
It was opened now.
Yes, and once this lid is off, it's very, very tough to put the demons back in. And it'll take a lot of goodwill by a lot of people, and we don't see the political leadership for it. Okay. And so if you want to be optimistic, you'll say there'll be new political leadership somewhat, and that.
Do you see any elections in the horizon?
No. I'm not talking necessarily about elections. And one of the things that's been happening right now is that both sides, one side, it's very clear that the streets are leading the politician on the protesters' side, and the politicians are sort of riding the coattails of the protesters.
Yes.
But also on the other side, the fact that Netanyahu or his ministers are crippled by their base, who's telling them move on with the reform or the revolution or whatever, and so on. And there's pressure on their side. But if you want to be optimistic, you'll say, well, we've looked into the abyss. We understand that this is a rift, that Israel may be the gravest danger that Israel has faced, more than any external danger. And we still want to be here, and we still want to live together and raise our children here. It'll take another language, another leadership. It'll take a lot of people not only looking at the other side and pointing at the other side. There's back in my army days, which were a long time ago, there was a saying that when you point the finger at somebody, 3 fingers are pointed at you. And I think both sides need to look within themselves. And if we do that, maybe that'll be the beginning of something good and something more solid. And the political arrangements that we lived around will be replaced by something deeper. You got to be optimistic to think of that, and let's be optimistic.
Yes.
It's Independence Day soon.
What is the alternative? Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's stay optimistic and still, but in a rational way.
Yes.
So many ifs, so much uncertainty, and we are really approaching very, very emotional national days in front of us. Days of memorial. And also maybe 75 years of independence. We're allowed to be also happy about this. How will it all be celebrated and commemorated is left to be seen.
Not politicized.
And not politicized. I'm afraid that we passed this moment already, but it's left to be seen. Ofer and Noa, thank you very much for this discussion. And thank you for our viewers and audience, and we see us in the next program. We'll keep the optimism. Thank you.